Hello, lore nerds. Today, we're doing something just slightly different. Instead of covering a historical event, we're going to go over the history of a character in the Forgotten Realms and everything they've been through. Today, that character is Mystra, goddess of magic and her various incarnations, because there are a lot. Starting off with her first incarnation, this version is actually called Mistral. She is a greater deity and also called the Lady of Mysteries. She embodies the weave, and aside from magic, her portfolio also included knowledge, energy, invention, creativity, song, time, and the season of spring. Since she was essentially the embodiment of the weave, her magic was pretty much limitless, being able to cast unlimited spells of any level as much as she wants, and was immune to any spell except those bypassing her magic by drawing on the primal force the weave was made from. Unless, of course, she wants to be affected by the spell, in which case she just lets it happen. She was supposedly born during the creation of the universe when Selûne and Shar were fighting, Selûne being the goddess of light and Shar the goddess of darkness, essentially. Selûne threw a part of herself into Shar, which broke off a bit of Shar, and those bits merged to form Mistral. Because of this, light and dark, she was more neutralish, but did favor Selûne, largely because throughout history, Shar has attempted to steal Mistral's power. And, Shar's kind of a bitch. I did go over this creation myth in my video on the creation myth of the Forgotten Realms, so do check out that if you want a bit more detail about how all of this and more went down. Mistral died when Karsus used that one very powerful spell to become her so that he could defeat a bunch of magic-eating slug monsters from underneath the ground. Again, I do go over that more in my video on the Nithries. That was just a very bad move because since he took over the goddess of magic, that means the weave was no longer being maintained, which means the weave got fucked up. Karsus immediately died, the Nithries cities plummet, and Mistral also died. But luckily, she almost instantaneously reincarnated as Mystra, repaired the weave, and saved a couple of the cities. So yeah, again, yes, I do go over that more on my video on the Nithries. Mystra, the second incarnation, was also a greater deity, among the most powerful and intelligent. She was less chaotic and more balanced, which was reflected in her first act upon coming into existence. She immediately used her power to alter the weave so that mortals could no longer cast 10th level or higher spells, as well as other limitations to prevent something like Karsus's Folly happening again. Mystra also chose a special mortal to make her representative in the material plane, called the Magister. Probably the most famous one would be Elminster. This title was given to those she deemed worthy, and the title bestowed many benefits, as you would expect of basically the chosen one of the goddess of magic. Then comes the juicy stuff. 1 hour before being summoned by Lord Ao, Mystra granted a part of her power in the form of a pendant to a girl named Midnight. Then all the gods were summoned by Ao and scolded by him for being reckless and irresponsible, then cast down to walk the mortal world in their avatar forms vulnerable and mortal. Mystra was captured by Bane, another god of very nasty stuff, and Midnight and some adventurers came to her aid. She regained the pendant and thus was near full power-ish, and headed for the celestial staircase which led back into the heavens. However, the gateway was guarded by Helm, the god of guardians, who did not let her pass. They fought and Mystra was killed. Later on, after the gods war and some stuff, Midnight became Mystra after being offered the position by Lord Ao, keeping the name to avoid confusion and smoothen the process. This new Mystra was also a very powerful deity. She was supposedly so powerful that only Ao surpassed her, but that was a secret. Over half of her power laid in her chosen and the deity Azuth, as planned by Ao so she did not just rule over all of realm space. Not long after becoming the next Mystra, she was assassinated by Cyric, god of murder, and her old friend from when she was still immortal, who was aided by Shar, who was basically her mother or grandmother or something like that. The consequences were, however, far worse than Shar had predicted, and this caused the Spellplague, which I did cover in a previous video, so do watch that if you want to know what the hell the Spellplague is. Weirdly, it took a long time for Mystra to resurrect, unlike previous times which are fairly brief, like when Mistral reincarnated as Mystra almost immediately. She was dead for nearly a century and resurrected by her chosen, Elminster. Even then, it still took around 7 years for her to fully recover. And yes, this reincarnated Mystra, the one that's around right now, is the Midnight Mystra, the one who was given the amulet and all of that. It's the same one. As of the current year in the Forgotten Realms, Mystra has only been back for less than a decade or so. That brings us to a close with her history, and as you can see, she has a very complicated and quite interesting past, and she has died a lot. These are, of course, the lore reasons, but out of game, they're basically explanations given for why the magic system between editions changes. Now that we're going into 1 D&D or 5.5e or whatever you want to call it, the magic system will most likely change again, meaning once again Mystra will most likely die. Of course, I will do a video covering the lore updates we get through this, a new version of D&D, or multiple depending on how much lore is changed or made. So do watch out for that whenever it happens. But until that happens, I have now covered most of the lore for you. I hope you enjoyed this video, as I did enjoy making it, and I'll see you next time.